The ship smelled like rust and old blood. Arya noticed it the moment the airlock sealed behind her, that metallic, copper-tinged reek that clung to the walls of the Vortex Colosseum, a floating arena the size of a small moon, orbiting the gas giant Kethra. She had been aboard for 40 seconds and already 3 different species had stopped to stare at her. She didn't blame them. She was, after all, the smallest creature in the docking bay by a considerable margin. The Garathi delegation stood near the registration desk, 7-foot bipeds covered in overlapping plates of natural chitin, each one dark as volcanic glass. Their champion, Krex, stood at the center of the group like a monument to violence. 8 feet tall. 4 upper limbs, each one ending in a fist the size of a human head. His exoskeletal hide had been scored with ritual scarring, each groove a record of a fight won. Arya walked past them without slowing. "That's the human representative," she heard one of the Garathi aides whisper in Galactic Standard. The translation chip behind her ear caught it cleanly. "The one from the Deathworld." "It has no natural armor," another murmured. "No claws. No secondary limbs. It's soft." "The Council sent a soft skin to compete?" Krex said nothing. He simply watched her with his 4 black compound eyes, the way a predator watches something it hasn't yet decided is worth eating. Arya set her registration pack on the counter, smiled at the clerk, a 4-armed Thelian who looked equally baffled by her presence, and began filling out the paperwork. The Vortex Games happened once every 7 Galactic Standard years. They weren't just sport. They were diplomacy in the oldest language the galaxy understood, dominance. The species whose representative performed best in the arena earned favorable trade routes, resource concessions, expanded territorial influence. The ones who performed worst were quietly reassigned to the outer systems, their political weight reduced to nothing. Humanity had never sent a representative before. This was the first time. The Interspecies Council had laughed when the application arrived. Politely, of course, they always did things politely, but the laughter was real. Humans were Tier 3 on the Deathworld Index, which sounded impressive until you realized that Garathi homeworld ranked Tier 1. Humans had no natural weapons. No armor plating. No venom glands. No echolocation. No reinforced skeletal structure. What they had, the Council noted in their review, was an interesting biological history and a pattern of surviving things they had no business surviving. The application was approved on a technicality. Arya had trained for this for 4 years. The first match was against a Reckon, a reptilian species from a high-gravity world, built like a boulder with legs, whose natural fighting style relied on crushing weight and grappling. The crowd of 80,000 beings packed into the Colosseum watched in confused silence as the tiny human walked into the ring. The Reckon charged. Arya moved. Not away. Through. She slipped inside the creature's reach in the half-second before impact, planted both feet, dropped her center of gravity the way her trainer had drilled into her 10,000 times, and used the Reckon's own momentum to redirect 2 tons of charging alien into the arena floor. The impact shook the ring. The Reckon lay stunned, blinking, utterly confused about what had happened to its body. Arya stepped back. Breathed. Waited for it to rise. It didn't. The Colosseum was very quiet. Then, somewhere in the upper tiers, a Thelian began to click its mandibles together, the Thelian equivalent of applause. Others joined. The sound built slowly, alien rhythms layering over each other, until the noise was something vast and strange and unmistakably appreciative. In the Garathi section, Krex watched and said nothing. She won her 2nd match. Then her 3rd. Each time, the Colosseum grew louder when she entered the ring. Each time, the delegates from other species leaned forward in their seats. They had expected to watch a human fail. What they were watching instead was something they didn't have a word for yet, a creature with no natural weapons who had turned her own body into a weapon anyway. Who had taken the fact of her softness, her smallness, her biological vulnerability, and weaponized it. She was fast because she had to be. She was precise because she could not afford not to be. She read her opponent's movements the way a linguist reads a text, hunting for patterns, for repetitions, for the moment an attack was already committed before it even began. The Garathi delegation stopped laughing after her second match. The final was always between the top two seeds. When the bracket resolved, nobody was surprised. Arya versus Krex. The night before the match, she sat alone in her quarters and looked at her hands. Unarmored. Unclawed. The knuckles a little swollen from training, the palms calloused, the tendons visible when she spread her fingers. Completely ordinary human hands. She thought about what the Garathi aide had said when she arrived. It's soft. She almost smiled. The Colosseum was at capacity. Every species with a delegation present had packed their section. The noise was a physical thing, pressing against her skin as she walked out into the ring. Krex was already there. Up close, he was even larger than she'd registered from a distance. The ritual scarring on his arms told the story of 37 victories. He had never lost. Not once, in a career that spanned 2 decades of galactic standard years. He had broken the limbs of a Thelian warrior, had fought a Recon to a standstill before outlasting it, had once won a match with 2 of his own limbs temporarily paralyzed. He looked at Arya the way the ocean looks at a rock it's about to cover. The starting bell rang. He came at her immediately, no hesitation, no circling, a champion's confidence. 4 arms moving in coordinated sweeps designed to cut off every angle of escape, to overwhelm, to crush. Arya did not run. She timed the gap between his second and third arm movement, a window of less than a quarter second, a structural weakness in his attack pattern she'd spent 2 days studying in recorded footage of his previous matches, and she stepped into it. Her elbow found the joint between his upper right limb's second and third segment. Not a power strike. A precision strike, targeting the exact anatomical weak point that the Garathi exoskeleton left unprotected at full extension. Krex made a sound she hadn't heard him make in any of the recordings. He pulled back. Reassessed. Good, she thought. Now we're having a different conversation. What followed was 12 minutes that the sports analysts would spend the next 3 years arguing about. Arya didn't try to match Krex's strength. She borrowed it. Redirected it. She made the arena floor her ally and his momentum her weapon. She accepted pain where she had to, a glancing blow to her shoulder that would leave a bruise the size of a dinner plate, and turned each exchange into information. He was stronger. She was more patient. He was faster. She was more precise. And when he overcommitted on his signature move, the forelimb overhead crush that had ended more matches than any other technique in his career, she wasn't where he expected her to be. She was behind him. Her arm went around the joint where his neck met his thoracic armor, locking in at the exact angle that applied maximum pressure to Garathi circulatory pathways without triggering the exoskeleton's defensive locking response. It was a technique that didn't exist in any galactic combat manual. It had been developed in a dojo on a small blue planet by humans who'd spent generations figuring out how to stop larger, stronger opponents. Krex struggled. For 15 seconds, he struggled with everything he had, and he had considerable power. She held on. Then he went still. The signal light above the ring turned from red to white, submission. The Colosseum erupted. Arya released him carefully, stepped back, and stood breathing in the center of the ring while 80,000 alien beings made noise in 80,000 alien ways, and it all meant the same thing. Krex rose slowly. His 4 compound eyes found her across the ring. She met his gaze without flinching. He crossed the ring in 4 strides, raised one of his great scarred arms, and placed a closed fist against his own chest, the Garathi gesture of genuine respect, offered only to equals, never to opponents considered lesser. Arya raised her right hand and pressed her fist to her own chest in return. The gesture needed no translation. Later, in the debriefing room, a council mediator asked Arya to explain her strategy. She thought about it for a moment. "We come from a world that wanted to kill us," she said finally. "We've been improvising since the beginning." She picked up her water ration, nodded politely, and left. Outside, somewhere in the corridor, she could hear the delegates from 17 species still talking about what they'd just seen. Good, she thought. Let them talk.